Good evening and welcome to the 92nd episode of the Sportsballers podcast. I'm Eric. I will be hosting this week. As usual, we don't have a lot of sports to talk about given the fact that the coronavirus is going on still, but we've got much more important issues to discuss given what's been in the news the last week and a half, really, since last Tuesday or Monday. I can't remember which day, but it doesn't matter. Obviously, talking about the murder of George Floyd at the hands of the Minneapolis police, and the unrest that's followed that should have been expected and has been, despite the complaints about some of the damage that it might have done physically to certain buildings and whatnot, it's been effective because now all four cops have been arrested. They're being charged, and before none of them were being charged, including the main perpetrator, which is just dumbfounding and something needed to be said. And fortunately, we're moving, at least in this instance, towards some type of appropriate level of justice. But once again, this issue highlighted the overall issue of police brutality and racial discrimination among law enforcement and the way it affects Black Americans across the country every single day. Most don't end up dead on the ground, but many end up being harassed, brutalized, unfairly arrested, sometimes even framed. And in situations like this, they do end up dead. And this is an issue that has been raised consistently since the beginning of this country, really. Like, the United States has always had these issues, even before it was officially the United States. And those complaints have largely fallen on deaf ears because some people liked the way it was. Racists enjoyed having power over African Americans, and other individuals who might not have believed that they were racist held views that it wasn't really as bad as everybody says. And they refused to listen to the communities that said, this is an issue. Well, maybe now people will actually start to listen. And that's why when people talk about riots and when people talk about looting and damage done, I say it's a byproduct of democracy. It's a byproduct of protesting. It's unfortunate, no doubt, but it's the price we pay for having the ability and the right to protest and to assemble in public like this. And to tell me that unfortunate fallout as a result of this trumps in any way the initial issue that started the entire thing is absolute nonsense. It's infuriating. And frankly, if somebody insists on going down that line, I have no patience for that at this point. It needs to be understood across the board that Black lives matter. Okay, there's no talking about all lives at this point because all lives aren't under duress. It's Black lives that are under duress here, and it's people like me and Corey. We're white. We're the majority in this country, and it's us that have to be the change because Black people can tell us all they want. They can scream it from the rooftops that they're being mistreated. It's up to us to listen. Because if we don't listen, nothing's going to change. Because the Black community doesn't have the political power to do so right now. And I fear that if we continue to ignore these issues, we will continue to see no progress in any regard and more divisiveness across the board. And that's just totally unacceptable. So let's move forward and let's do what's right. And let's make something happen here as Americans to fix what's wrong and what's broken in the United States.
I mean, I completely agree with everything you said. I mean, with me personally, I've been sort of on an emotional roller coaster this week. So like, I think on Monday I was angry and then, sort of progressed. Now I'm feeling encouraged. Like I get the sense that people are listening now. Like, these aren't new issues certainly, but what I feel is new is that, the protesting is working. So I think we're headed in the right direction. I think the path of progress is not a straight line. Some stuff changes quickly, and some stuff changes slowly. But I certainly think we're headed in the right direction. I'm encouraged in that regard. It should have taken this long. Like, these protests and stuff have been going on for years, and nothing changed. So Hopefully, um, people start changing some minds. Hopefully, people go out and vote. Um, and you know, I have a positive outlook now.
It's hard. Um, it's so hard to be optimistic these days. With Donald Trump in the White House, I feel like I'm in this constant state of pessimism, which generally is not my character or my outlook on life. But the fact that he has been the president for more than 3.5 years now, or just about 3.5 years, and we still see people agreeing with and supporting his rhetoric. I know that there are people out there who hate him and who hate what he stands for and who don't agree with him. But there are still so many people who don't really listen to what he says or take into consideration other people's feelings about what he's saying. And they only care that his hateful messages aren't directed at them. The fact that that still exists not only makes me pessimistic for the election this November, but just makes me pessimistic about the human race in general. Um, but through all of this, and I mean, this is yet another instance of a innocent black man being murdered by the police, character assassination after the fact. I haven't even bothered to research whether the rumors about him having been arrested are true because it doesn't matter. If he was, that doesn't play any role in him being killed last week. It doesn't make it any less terrible. It doesn't make it any more justifiable. But I'd like to borrow from Caron Butler's article in the, and we're going to talk a little bit more about his article, I think, during the show. But in the Players Tribune today, he wrote, "It's time to step up. It's time to draw a line in the sand and say that this is not okay. And I'm tired of people calling and texting saying, I don't know what to say right now. Man, just say something. I don't give an F if you got to issue a statement, send a tweet, record a video, quote someone smarter than you, make a t-shirt, whatever. But you have to say something. You can't just sit by and be quiet right now and play the PC. No more PC, no more politics, just what's real. Anyone without something real to say by now, as far as I'm concerned, that means they're part of the problem." I texted one of my friends this week and I said I don't know what to say. And I said more than like I do have things to say, and we're going to say things on the show today. Um but he's right. There is no more I don't know what to say. We have to have something to say right now. We have to stand up for our black friends, our black loved ones, our black coworkers, and our black acquaintances, and even the black people that we don't know in our lives. We have to say something on their behalf. Because just saying I have black friends doesn't mean anything right now if you're not actually standing up for them in some way.
I mean, if you don't know what to say, like, I feel like you do know what to say, but it's just, this is an uncomfortable conversation, right? Like, this is an uncomfortable topic to discuss, and everybody's, people can kind of, naturally recoil from it, but like this is real life, and racism is a problem, and it has to be addressed head on. Like, like if you're a white person and racial issues come up, you have the option to be like, well, that doesn't have to do with me, because that's over there. It's not here. Um, so, like, you have to be willing to open your eyes and look and, accept that this is a problem, and then we can start working together to figure out a solution.
I
Yeah, I think all that is very well said. I it's hard because like I mentioned, yeah, anybody that can see us and knows anything about us knows that Corey and I are white. Like we're not, we haven't lived that experience that African Americans deal with. But I also think about a lot how the fact that we grew up where we grew up. In the DC Baltimore area, where African Americans are actually the majority here. So most white people don't have that level of exposure to the black community. So they're relying on what their parents tell them or what the media tells them or any number of things to influence how they feel and how they visualize minorities in this country. And to me, that's one of the benefits of social media is that you do get to interact with people that are different from you from different environments. But at the same time, it starts at home. I mean, even people that live around here are racist. Like there are people that lived around African Americans their entire life, and despite the fact that they've existed in these communities harmoniously for the most part, they still come away with this attitude that you know African Americans are different from me, that they're not the same type of person, whether it's an inferiority thing or whatever. They don't have that same. They don't feel like that person is their equal, which is insane to me. And it's that attitude that, that the black community's issues can be dismissed as their problem that frustrates the hell out of me. Because anybody with any sense can piece together how we've gotten to where we've gotten. And I think that people need to wake up. And if people see individuals ignoring these issues or deflecting from them or trying to pin them on something else that's not related or not relevant, then these people need to be called out, like not just ignored, not just tuned out, but called out and frankly in a little bit of a hostile language here, they need to be humiliated for those beliefs because that's garbage. I mean, at this point, if you are not seeing what's going on, you're trying not to pay attention, and that's totally unacceptable.
Yeah. Eric touched on this. We've grown up in areas that are on a whole majority black. I grew up in a neighborhood where the only other white families in the neighborhood were on the opposite side. I didn't interact with them at all. My close friends growing up were black outside of the friends that I went to church with because church is still very segregated, and I went to a almost fully white church. When I began running competitively, I joined a track team where there were only three. We have 300 kids on the team, and there were maybe 4 or 5 other white athletes on the team.
300.
Yeah, we have a huge team, and I could count on one hand the number of white kids on the team. Um, that does not by itself make me not racist. I talking to different people over the past couple weeks and just sharing experiences and hearing their stories, sharing my stories, and thinking about my stories. One thing that came up is, when you're driving through a rundown area, a lot of people, your car is already locked, but you tend to roll up your windows, right? It's a high crime area, it's run down. For me, I've done that, and it's not consciously because there are black people in that area, but why is it run down? Why is it a high crime area? It's because we don't take care of our black communities. So while me rolling my windows up may not be because the people that I see are black directly, it is very much indirectly because of that. I've been called out on certain things that I was not aware that I was doing. Growing up, I thought that it should be my goal in life to be colorblind. And I don't think that there's ever been a time in my life that I have purposefully treated two people who are different races in different ways. But that doesn't mean that I haven't done it subconsciously on some level. And you can't try to be colorblind. You have to notice those things. You have to make a concerted effort sometimes to make sure that you're treating everybody equally and fairly and the same way, regardless of their race or their sex or their gender identity or whatever. And I want to be able to spend more time listening to people, but I also, Caron says that we also have to say something. That it's not enough just to listen. We have to take the things that we are hearing and learning and apply it to our lives and try to help direct other people to apply it to their lives. Not because we think that we're better than them because we treat people more fairly, but because we want those people that we care about, those black people that we care about, to be treated more fairly. And not just by us, but by everybody.
I mean, for me growing up, I never really experienced any racism directly directed at me, fortunately. Or if I did, I didn't notice or pick up on it. So even like when I went to college, I sort of expected, some people to say stuff about affirmative action and, you took a spot from a white person, because they tried to boost the numbers or whatever, but nobody even said that. So fortunately, I haven't had to deal with that, but, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And, this is still a problem, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable for everybody. There's no doubt about it. But if you want to change things, you have to get a little uncomfortable sometimes, and that's something that I've tried to do is, especially lately, is when somebody tells me something, yes, I listen, but I also try to learn some on my own too. Like an example of that would be, we've got the coronavirus pandemic still affecting the United States to a significant degree, and it's affected the black community more significantly than others. And a lot of people have pointed out that the healthcare industry has racial biases as well, with the way that doctors treat black patients versus white, versus the way that they diagnose them, versus the way that they handle them when they call 911 when they're having a health emergency. And these are things that I didn't even think about. You hear about police brutality, you hear about discrimination in the workplace and things like that. You don't think about it in terms of healthcare, but it's there. And it's just one more thing. And I researched it and I said, how pervasive is this discrimination, this bias? And it's noticeable. The health outcomes for African Americans are so much worse than for white patients, and it's not because you can't divide it strictly on socioeconomic lines. It's not just about your status as far as money and your healthcare options and things like that. It has to do with the way the doctors treat the patients, and it's things like that where it's like this issue exists around every corner. And white people have to learn to accept that reality, because if you never accept it, you can't fix it. The first step to fixing a problem is acknowledging there is one, and you got to be able to do that at the very least. And if you can't do that, then I'm sorry, but I don't have time for you at this point. Get it together, figure it out, and figure out how you can be a better member of your community, because if you're sitting there on the sidelines thinking it's not your problem, well, you're the problem.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is why we need effective leadership. This is why people, in charge need to listen and figure out hey, we've got a problem here. What are we going to do? We need to bring our community together, our community, the entire United States of America. I think we're sort of forgetting the united part a little bit. Um, so we have to sit down and we have to listen, but also there's some action that needs to be taken. There's people marching in the streets making it very clear that some stuff's got to change, and people are going to keep marching until stuff does change, which is good.
Yeah, I think that's all. I think everybody here has an understanding of the issue. It's just, it's so frustrating. But um, seeing as this is a sports-related podcast, it is important for us also to include the perception or the perspective of athletes, and we've had a varying degree of uh, good and bad takes, if you will, about this incident and about what's going on in the country. I guess we'll start. Corey mentioned a little bit earlier, and I know that he and Evan, I believe, have read Caron Butler's article in the Players Tribune. I haven't had time to read it thoroughly, so I'm gonna defer to you guys about what you read and your thoughts on what Caron had to say.
I mean, I didn't read it super intensely, but he described his life growing up and his dealings with law enforcement
in Wisconsin,
and
yep.
Yeah, in Wisconsin, and how it's thunder here. How he was treated differently than his white neighbors, and nothing in there really surprised me, to be honest. Like for me growing up, I remember when I got my driver's license. Before I went anywhere, both my parents and my dad especially sat me down for a very serious discussion about how to handle yourself if you get pulled over by a police officer. So that topic came up in our discussion last week as well. But so nothing in there surprised me really, because like he was talking about how the justice system just turns you into a number. You're just one of the people rolling through here. Well, not even one of the people, just one of them, and you sort of are owned by the justice system, and that was it's sad to read, but also not a surprise.
Yeah, I can't say that I was surprised by anything either, but you hear so often white people will try and say that black people just need to cooperate with the police and their interactions with the police will be better, and that's all it takes. Um, in Caron's article, he talked about being pulled over on his bicycle for running a red light, and they had him out there for more than 2 hours. He's not resisting. In fact, he's telling them, just give me the ticket. And instead, they're asking where else he has properties and just trying to keep him out there for as long as possible. I mean, you're standing out there with these cops. People are driving by you constantly, looking out their window to see who is this guy that got pulled over on his bicycle. And they're just increasing the number of people who see him by keeping him out there longer than necessary, just trying to humiliate him. My mom wrote something on Facebook. She shared and wrote something on Facebook, and she shared a tidbit of a story of mine from when I was in high school and got pulled over for speeding on the Beltway, for reckless driving. I was driving way over the speed limit and changing lanes rapidly enough for it to definitely be considered reckless driving. And cop pulls me over, yells at me to put my hands out the window. He approaches my car with his gun drawn. And he gets to the window, asks for my license. I give it to him. He looks at it. I've got like this thin mustache at the time, and he must have thought that I either looked slightly Hispanic or Eastern European or something. because he asked me if I spoke English. And the moment that I answered yes, like his entire body language went from pretty aggressive to very relaxed just off of that. As soon as he realized that I was a white English speaker, his entire body language changed. And that no, I was respectful throughout the whole stop. I texted my parents before he asked for their number to call them, and I told them what had happened. So when he called them, like they already knew it was up, and certainly like he probably had a lot of respect for that, but none of that is what made his body language ease up.
Mm-hmm.
It was all that initial me saying yes, officer, in English that relaxed him. And you're telling me that we should expect for our black friends to be able to deal with an agitated, aggressive officer who had it. And I guarantee that there are a lot of other white people out there who have similar stories where they were not the subject of police brutality, but they also saw that same thing and didn't think anything of it. I didn't think anything of that for a long time.
I mean, yeah, it's just because, just because we might not experience it firsthand like that, we definitely can see it happen with our own eyes. And, in this case, you did have it happen to you in a way. But, it's something that, my brother noticed one time. He was in a McDonald's and there's a police officer sitting there, just eating his food. And this is in College Park, right on Route 1. And a black student walks in, unassuming, just walked in with his backpack, probably was, getting home from class or whatever, or on his way home. And the cop, his antennas went up, and he stared that guy down the entire time he was in the store, from the time he got in line to the time that he walked out with his meal. And once he had left the building, he kept his eyes trained on him in the parking lot and beyond until he was out of sight. And then he returned to whatever it is that he was doing. And, you hear stuff like that, and it's just like, you can't help but think that it's beyond just personal bias at that point. You got to question, when it's that, aggressive and it's that deliberate. And when you see stuff like in the streets with the protesters, where you constantly see when white protesters get between a police officer and a black protester, you see the cop ease up. It's like that's the job, is to ease up off the white guy, and it's like what the hell's going on here? Like, why? It's one thing if it's like internal with the officers, where it's like you can't really tell until it comes out. This seems like it's much worse than that. It seems like this is part of the deal, where it's like you don't have to care about the black people when you're a cop. The white people, you can't beat them up. You got to be restrained with them. But black guys, if you lose it a little bit, it's all good. And there's no other way around it. Like this is an issue that police officers need to fix, or else they're going to continue to lose the trust of the people that they're supposed to protect. And when that happens, you get situations like we have now. You get tragic situations where you've got shootouts with the cops. I mean, there's all kinds of positive things that can happen from reform here beyond just protecting the citizens, the black citizens that are suffering from police brutality. It's beneficial to all, and that's not the most important thing. It needs to benefit the people that are hurt, but this idea that even if you're just doing it for a selfish reason, there is an end game that benefits you from avoiding this behavior. So, and I have a lot to say about this. We all do, I think, and I don't want to drone on about how awful police officers are and how how much life sucks. But that is kind of the topic this week, and it's because they've made it a topic.
Well, Corey, thank you for sharing that story because you hadn't shared that with me before. I didn't know that that's what happened. Like I know you shared you got pulled over for speeding, but I didn't. You hadn't shared your sort of interaction with the police officer that night. I guess it was nighttime.
Yeah, I
That
mean,
day.
I'm not shy about sharing my personal experiences with people. I'm very open about myself. I feel like I don't necessarily have anything to hide, and that doesn't mean that I've never done anything that I should be ashamed of. But I'm also more than willing to be called out for it. I want to learn from my mistakes, and I think that a lot of people maybe don't share that sentiment, but I do, and so I'm happy to share those things. I know I've shared bits and pieces of that story, but it really wasn't until very recently, within the last several months, really, just thinking about it, that I even recognized the significance of the interaction itself. Um, so, um, I don't know, like this has been a really emotional week and change for me in general. It's the start of the summer as far as cross country training goes. Um, this was our first week. Monday was our first day of summer training, and I decided I was going to do. I'm gonna do the summer training alongside my athletes, not physically alongside because of the coronavirus, but I went out for my run on Monday, and in the light of everything that's going on right now, I couldn't help but think, I've got a team of about a little shy of 40 athletes, and at least half of them are black. How and they're out there running because I've assigned them runs as their coach. Who's to say that one of them couldn't become the next Ahmaud Arbery? And that scares the bejesus out of me because you can't say, "Oh, it wouldn't happen here," because it's not the South. This can happen anywhere. Any one of my black athletes could be targeted just because they're black and they're out running in a neighborhood where some white person decides doesn't I don't think that they belong here. Christian Cooper up in New York could have been, like, that situation has gotten glossed over because of George Floyd for a lot of people. But, we already knew, and most people have accepted by this point, that police brutality against black people exists. Whether people are doing anything about it is a different subject, but people are at least recognizing that that is an issue. But what about just the citizen who weaponizes the police? Like, who's to say that there's not going to be some white woman out walking her dog in a neighborhood that one of my black athletes is in, and she's not going to call the cops because there's a suspicious looking teenager, a suspicious looking African American teenager who's running through my neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that there were a lot of parallels with what happened in Central Park, because it happened on the same day, I believe, or at least it was, reported or whatever, at the same time, and it was pretty clear that the lady that called the cops had every intent to weaponize the police, almost in the hopes that, maybe not even almost, maybe straight up in the hopes that Christian Cooper would become George Floyd.
And she knew that she could do that too.
Yes, I mean, she put on a show.
If there was no video recording, just listening to her audio, she sounds in distress.
Yeah, and the thing is, and I actually read this. People that know things like this, like district attorneys, a woman in distress like that, a phone call recording of that is considered admissible evidence of guilt because it adds credibility to the story. Like, no woman could possibly fake that, right? Say, well, of course they could, because everybody can make things up and put on a show. But the fact that the white lady is always believed, whereas the black guy is always doubted, is just another layer of the issue. And
he could have gone to jail for years, like just gotten locked up and just thrown
for going
away
out and looking at birds.
For looking at birds.
Yeah, there's no excuse for that behavior either, and that's part of the issue. Is like, again, that's not even a person that is denying the existence of police brutality and discrimination. That's a person that knows it exists and wants to use it against somebody. Like, that is as evil as it gets, as far as I'm concerned. Like, that is so outside the bounds of what this country is supposed to be about. And speaking of which, we transitioned to an issue that we had 4 years ago, when a certain football player decided to take a knee during a preseason football game and ultimately was blackballed. The President of the United States demonized him and people of his ilk that decided to follow up with that protest. And now, well, we're kind of back to square one, where another black guy has been killed by a cop totally unjustifiably on camera. And suddenly Colin Kaepernick is looking just as right as he was 4 years ago. And, this there's been various levels of, takes on that now relative to where it was in 2017, when the issue really came to a head after President Trump decided to pop off and throw red meat to his rabid base by demonizing black football players. But here we are, and this discussion has come up again. And it seems like a lot of people have come around on the idea that the protest wasn't about disrespecting troops. It wasn't about, antagonizing patriotism. It was about protesting police brutality. And, it seems like public opinion has been swayed somewhat with that regards. Unfortunately,
not everybody.
My favorite football player of all time stuck his foot in his mouth yesterday when Drew Brees decided to announce on an interview that he doesn't agree with anybody that takes a knee, because to him that flag and that anthem represents, his two grandfathers that fought in World War II and fought for our freedom and blah, blah, blah. Same old talking points we've heard forever. And to me, the thing is, like, a lot of people were like shocked and appalled that Drew Brees said this. And the thing is, I wasn't. I was not. I know that Drew Brees is, he's got a good guy reputation, and I get all that. But he's always come off to me like he's a conservative, and this is by and large a conservative viewpoint. And
I know he's from Texas.
Yes, he's from Austin, Texas, which is not exactly a conservative hub, but he has always come across to me as being a conservative. I mean, he sponsors Wrangler jeans. I mean, let's be real. That's not exactly the brand of forward-thinking liberals.
I mean, they're just pants.
Let's call it what it is, though. But
they're pants.
they're pants that are worn by good old boys in the South. Let's be honest about that. But anyway, more importantly,
and a pair of Wranglers are in there somewhere.
See, the issue to me isn't so much that what a bad guy Drew Brees is, because do I think Drew Brees is a terrible person? No, of course not. But this is a viewpoint that's shared by a ton of people, and Drew Brees should have known better. Like, it's one thing for some idiot from Arkansas to spout off about this, or even some idiot from Maryland to spout off about this. But this is a guy who shares a locker room with mostly black players in plays in a city that is mostly black and is a part of a community that has been dismissed and has been harmed because of leadership's inability to accept that they need to take care of their black citizens too. I mean, New Orleans was ravaged by Hurricane Katrina, and people in charge were asleep at the switch largely because it was affecting a black community. So Brees should have known better than to sit there and say this, and he should have known better than to think this. That's the big issue. It's not, it's not like he just misspoke or he said something that came off wrong. No, the sentiment that he shared was authentic, and he didn't walk that back with his apology. And the sentiment that he shared was that, you know, that flag represents the troops to me and freedom and America and all that good stuff. And the main issue that a lot of white people have is because of their privilege, they think that because they perceive something one way, that means everybody has to share that view. And anybody with any sense can put on their thinking cap and see why a black man in the United States would look at the flag and hear the national anthem and not get the same warm and fuzzy feeling that Drew Brees got. I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot of, intuitive thinking to piece it together that flag and that song and that gesture don't mean the same thing because this country, treats these people differently. I mean, I understand why Drew Brees, a white guy who became a millionaire playing football, would say, hey, yeah, America's awesome. Hell yeah. But the fact that he couldn't take a moment, especially in this time where we need to be at our most empathetic and come across any less selfish and any less lacking of self-awareness, is just a total indictment on his ability to check his privilege.
My thinking is when somebody, we went through this back in 2016 as well, when during the kneeling during the national anthem, when somebody's like, they're disrespecting the flag and the troops, and that's the issue that they get upset about. Like, they're completely missing the point. And not only completely missing the point, but intentionally completely missing the point. Like, you have changed the subject to something else that is unrelated. And you are burying your head in the sand and ignoring the important issue that's being protested about. Like, they weren't kneeling during the national anthem for fun, right? Like, we're protesting police brutality and social injustices in this country. But then when people started bringing it up about the troops and the flag and stuff, the actual message got lost. And, just like you said before, it's an uncomfortable conversation to have. So, the message was intentionally twisted and switched around to make the messengers seem not credible, less important, and not the actual good people and the good versus evil of it all.
So what really disappointed me about Drew Brees saying this, because he was asked if the NFL players choose to kneel again this season, and there are rumors that they plan to, what is your opinion of that? And his response was, I will never stand for people disrespecting the flag. When everything with Kaepernick first started, I honestly wasn't entirely sure how to feel, and I tried to spend a lot of time thinking and hearing both sides of the argument, because I hadn't gotten to a point. I hadn't thought enough about different protests that have occurred, peaceful or otherwise, to really come to the full understanding that I've come to by now, which is that a protest is supposed to make somebody uncomfortable. If I look at Evan and tell him, no, if you're going to protest, you need to protest in this way, I'm telling him to protest in a way that's not going to hinder me, not going to affect my ability to drive somewhere, or that I won't have to see and I won't have to think about. So how is that a protest? we're taking a group that is oppressed, is protesting because they're oppressed, and we are further oppressing them by limiting the way in which they can protest their oppression. Which I didn't get that initially when Colin Kaepernick began kneeling. I've had 4 years. Drew Brees has had 4 years to realize that it was never about the flag. It's about what the flag represents, which is our country as it is, not our country as we wish it was, not our country as we pretend it is, but the country as it actually is right now. And our country as it is right now, it's not something to be proud of. Yeah, I'm proud that we have people of all different nationalities and races and cultures here, but they're not all treated the same. So it's not even a sense of pride. It's a sense of I'm happy that there are people that are different from me that I get to see and share in their experiences. But I'm not proud of the way that they're treated. So I was disappointed in that initially from Drew Brees. I saw a picture today. Drew Brees did kneel during the national anthem with some of his teammates at one point. So that just kind of makes it a little bit odd that he would say I would never, that's his response, that he's then taking this question about players kneeling and turning it back into a thing about the flag. There's the fact.
I do feel, though, when there were some people who were kneeling back in 2016, and it was sort of it sort of came off as a hollow gesture. Like, remember Jerry Jones specifically, I think they were playing in Arizona. He was out there kneeling, and he but he looked so intently at the camera. Because, when you're Jerry Jones, the camera is on you. So he looked at the camera and was like, look at me, I'm kneeling with these guys. Now that we can, now we can play the song and unroll the big flag and stuff. But that it didn't seem like he fully grasped what the protest was about. And then he sort of just got attention for it in an attempt to make it go away. Corey, something you said that I completely agree with was like, when you're protesting something, you're supposed to make people uncomfortable. Like that's how you raise awareness for your cause. Like if you're not making somebody uncomfortable, you're not really doing it right. Like people who are protesting and standing in the street and blocking traffic, well, they wouldn't be protesting and blocking traffic if we fixed the thing they were protesting about. You have to look at it, from a macro view. You can't just be like, oh, we just need to get these people out of the road, and then everything's fine.
Yeah.
So.
And then today with Drew Brees' apology, and I know Eric said he didn't really walk back his comment, but the fact that he's even apologizing, that the only thing that he said was that he would not. The only thing that he said that people actually were upset about was that he would never stand for somebody disrespecting the flag in reference to players kneeling. So while he may not have walked back that comment, he's apologizing for hurting and disrespecting. You're telling me that he had 4 years to take into consideration Kaepernick's gesture, and all of a sudden, a day later, now he gets it? He's had years of playing with black teammates, of having the opportunity to listen. Malcolm Jenkins, he posted 2 videos to social media yesterday. The first one he ended up taking down, which was his initial reaction. The second one he left up, and he talked about his grandfather who fought in World War II. And when they came back, it wasn't just that they were coming back to racism. They were coming back, and they were attacked if they wore their uniforms. So black people who fought in the war couldn't even come back as proud veterans. And at the end of Malcolm Jenkins' video, he said, even though we're teammates, I can't let this one go. I would take it a step further and say, because you're teammates, I feel an obligation at this point that I'm not necessarily going to go and start calling out strangers on the internet if I don't. You have to be careful with that to an extent. But if it's somebody that I know, a friend or a relative of mine, I feel an obligation at this point. I have to try and and use what I have learned to educate the people that I care about and want for them to do better. And I'm
They would
still learning.
also respect your opinion because, you have a relationship with
I
them.
would hope that they would. I would hope that they would respect my opinion. I try not to just jump at people without having thought about it, but you know when somebody tries to tell me like and they come back like this week, a relative of mine was talking about you don't know the process that people go through to try and become police officers. You shouldn't say that we're not doing enough if you don't understand that process. Yeah,
But look at the
I
outcomes,
don't
though.
understand the whole process of how somebody becomes a cop. You're absolutely right. But I've done enough thinking that I've gotten to a point where I know that it doesn't matter if I don't know the process because I know the end result. And based on the end result, I know that we're not doing enough. I know that I'm not doing enough. I'm posting on social media more actively now, but I'm not out there protesting. We're talking about this in a public forum on our podcast that doesn't have a huge audience, but hopefully has enough of an audience that maybe it reaches somebody who needs to hear this message. But I know that there's other things that I need to do. I have not done enough because this is still a problem. And I may not know all of the things that I can do yet. In the past, I don't want to lose my job. And not just because it's a job and I need a job to make money, but also because I value my ability to make a difference in young men's lives and in a diverse group of young men's lives at DeMatha. That's one of the things I'm most proud of for being at DeMatha is the fact that we have a diverse student body from different racial and socioeconomic and geographic backgrounds. I love that about being at DeMatha, and it's why I teach there. And I want to be able to continue to be a role model and be an advocate for these students. But if we're not doing better as a country and I'm not doing something to try and make the country better, then me advocating for my black students isn't really doing them that much good in my current role because they're still going to grow up and leave DeMatha and they're still going to be living life in fear that something they do that is completely innocent will get them killed.
Yeah. Um, just a quick clarification. When Drew Brees took a knee in 2017, the team knelt before the national anthem. That wasn't
Got it.
during
Got
the
it. Okay.
anthem, which they still got dragged for, particularly from certain individuals that I knew personally were offended by that because they did it overseas because that game was taking place in England and showing some type of, I guess, making a statement against at the time the president of the United States overseas was supposed like the people treated like it was some seditious act, like it was something that you shouldn't do. You shouldn't be disrespecting your president when you're overseas in somebody else's turf. And I'm just like, well, that's laughable
Mhm.
because
This
well,
president is so respectful of other people.
yes, because the entire thing started because the president showed a severe lack of respect for American citizens. So that didn't hold much water for me. Yeah, it's frustrating again because, like I said, it seems like people in this country, like white people, have always had the feeling that, and they've always been taught that, your opinion matters, your take matters, and people have to listen to you. And so, if people disagree with them, it's seen as an affront to everything that they've been taught. And so when it's time for them to shut up and listen to people who are actually aggrieved in their communities with issues that they can't even comprehend, a lot of people have a hard time, with that because it goes back to their privilege. It's this idea that, I'm a white American male, which means, without saying it, you say the quiet part out loud, we call the shots, so to speak. And this feeling that that's being challenged when people who have issues that are outside your purview, it's like everybody has to weigh in on something. It's the issue of certain individuals always have to have an opinion about something, even if they have no idea what they're talking about. And it's something that needs to change. We need to do a little more listening and a lot less talking.
especially when
And then when we learn,
especially when somebody has something to say.
yes,
Um,
a lot of people talk and they say a lot without, really saying anything. And there's got to be a way for people to understand, how to communicate. And part of communication is not just talking; it's listening to. And that's we're at a severe deficit when it comes to listening in this country with a big section of the population. And now you got to listen because you know things have gone off the rails at this point,
I,
and probably rightfully
one thing
so.
that I would like to say, and this is in talking to my girlfriend, who is black, this week, she's been asked by people at work all week, and many of them people that she doesn't really talk to on a regular basis, "Are you okay?" And she really has not appreciated that at all. Um, it, it's kind of hollow, especially when it's somebody you don't hear from all the time. It's also not necessarily the group of people that she wants to share her feelings about this with. Just because you're a coworker doesn't mean that you have that kind of relationship with somebody. I've been very appreciative of her sharing her thoughts with me. I've been very appreciative of my black friends who are on social media who voluntarily share their own thoughts and experiences. And I have reached out to a couple of my closer friends who I have regular communication with, just to talk to them, not necessarily asking "Are you okay?" but wanting to know, that they're safe, and for them to know that I'm here, that I'm thinking about them, that I care about them, and that if they would like to share things with me, that I am here to listen, but also not demanding that they share, or even necessarily asking that they share, because it needs to be their choice. It Asking a black person at this point, with the amount of resources that are out there, the number of books and movies and um, and other resources that exist to help us understand and get an insight into the experiences that black people face in this country, it's not up to our black friends to educate us. There's more than enough material out there that we can use to educate ourselves. There are more than enough people sharing their experiences on social media voluntarily to help educate us if we need education. I'm still learning things from what I'm seeing on social media. I saw a great piece. A guy was talking about people who ask why the rioting and the looting, when all it does is it hurts your own community. And he shared an anecdote about his mother when she found out that her sister had passed away. she was so distraught, she basically threw herself into a wall. In the same vein, that doesn't bring her sister back. It only serves to harm and injure herself. But when your voice is not heard and you're in that much grief and anguish, sometimes it comes out in a destructive way. Um, and I already hadn't been vilifying looters and rioters, but that just made me see it so much clearer. And I appreciate the people who are taking that time to educate us, but it's not to make it a friend of ours responsibility to teach us and to tell us how you're feeling and why you're feeling a certain way. Just reeks of white privilege.
Oh, I didn't even think of it like that. I mean, I don't know if anybody reached out to me to ask how I was doing, but I mean, I've shared with people I confide in regularly and talk to regularly, sort of the ups and downs of everything. So like, earlier this week I was angry. I saw a post on Facebook about how, these people are rioting in the streets and the military should just come shoot them and stuff. Like I was trembling with rage. That's how upset I was. And then I think that was on Monday. And then on Tuesday, like I saw also on Facebook, there was a live report from Columbia Mall of people just protesting there. And like I teared up some because I felt, those people were standing out there representing me. Because that's where I'm from. I live in Georgia now, but I grew up going to that mall. I remember being pushed in a stroller around the mall. I remember another time we got stuck in the snow there and everything when I was in elementary school. Like that's my home right there. And those people are out there protesting for me as a black man. So, I found that to be particularly touching. I don't know. And then I sort of tried to get myself together, I guess. And like, sitting here crying over people standing in the parking lot. Like, it seemed a little ridiculous, but even still, it's just been a wild ride. But now I'm feeling encouraged, and I'm encouraged and proud that so many other people care. Like, it used to be just a black people issue. Now it's everybody is out in the streets protesting all around the world. And, I think there's going to be a positive outcome.
I hope so.
Yeah, I agree. I part of what encourages me is, as you mentioned, Evan, that you've got people that are buying into the aggressive and violent rhetoric about how to restore order to our cities by sending the troops in after American citizens and, um, enacting the Insurrection Act from like 1807 towards people who, maybe they're, starting a fire or, stealing stuff from a store, but that by no means reaches the level of insurrection. And
Is that grounds to shoot somebody in any context?
no, it's not. And
Like,
what gives me hope though is the fact that, you know, for a little while now, I've wondered, how would our military react? How would our military leaders react to being given orders or even suggestions to enact violence against American citizens? Because that's been a legitimate question to ask with the certain individuals we have running the show. And I'm not just talking about the president of the United States. I'm talking about people in the Senate as well, like Tom Cotton, who seems to be gung-ho, ready for a take-no-prisoners attitude to just go blasting everybody in the street with military-grade weapons. And fortunately, cooler heads finally took over and at the Pentagon, and they said, hell no, we're not doing this. Like, this doesn't raise the level of turning firearms on our own citizens. We are not doing that. That is...
What does that solve? Because that is the problem, right? Like somebody was killed for no reason. People are being killed for no reason. and now people are protesting these killings. And so the response is to go kill more people. Like, what are you trying to accomplish there?
Yeah,
These people protesting aren't expendable. You can't just shoot them and then sweep the bodies away and keep it rolling.
yeah. It's insanity, and we've also seen that with the way the police have handled the protesters as well. We've seen, at this point, probably hundreds of videos of unprovoked attacks by law enforcement on peaceful protesters who are doing absolutely nothing that warrants force to be used against them. And
There was a clinic that was destroyed by a group of police officers.
Just because?
I would imagine to try and frame protesters. I don't know that for a fact, but like that seems to be a common thing going on. I saw pictures that showed where like bricks had been stacked nice and neatly by law enforcement officers or by the city before any protesters even started showing up, basically like daring them to throw or giving them ammunition to throw things in order for the police to have an excuse to attack.
I mean, is this supposed to be fun for these police to just get all suited up and shoot rubber bullets at people and stuff? Like, what? Who is in charge here? Who is making these decisions? Some people need to be held accountable. This is absurd.
Yeah, and this just goes to show that, any argument that starts with, well, not all cops are bad. Well, yeah, thanks, but I'm watching organized police forces with apparently, a total jurisdiction to do whatever the hell they want to these protesters. I mean, you can't say, oh, not all cops are bad when, the cops that are in charge of, protecting protesters, really. I mean, that's what the cops are out there for. They're there to protect, the bystanders and the protesters from, inappropriate attacks. And instead, they're the ones being the aggressors. And none of it makes any sense. In fact, some of the cops are actually being the ones that were breaking into stores and stealing stuff. Like, we've seen videos of that, where there's a bunch of dudes in like SWAT gear almost grabbing a bunch of crap and throwing it in their trunk. It's like, what are you doing? Like, you're trying to create an environment where everybody can get pissed off at a bunch of looters to try to deflect away from your own sins. But here's the problem, dude. It's 2020. We all have one of these things. We've got camera phones. You're on camera presumably all the time when you're in the streets, especially when there's thousands of people pouring in the streets that are watching your every move. So you're not slick. So it pisses me off.
On live television.
Yeah. And it pisses me off when I see people say stuff like, oh, these rioters and these looters need to get shot, and anybody that's acting violent, like, okay, you're going to start with the police? You're going to shoot them? Because if that's what you're suggesting, you're a moron. You're equally moronic for suggesting shooting protesters. It doesn't make any sense. And, it's frustrating to me that Americans can sit there and watch what's going on and come away with all the wrong conclusions all the time because they just don't want to face the fact that maybe they're not out there, putting their knee on somebody's neck or, shooting an unarmed individual, but they're part of the problem. They're ingrained in the culture that has demonized African Americans from day one in the United States. And they don't want to accept that because to them, I'm not racist. That's always what they say. And I'm like, okay, but you're not doing a very good job of being anti-racist. And to me, that's just as big of a problem.
Near the end of Caron Butler's article in the Players Tribune, he said, this is a we thing. Some people may be reading this and saying to themselves, okay, but it don't apply to me. Nah, not okay. It does apply to you because it's the result of 400 years of trauma that we're witnessing, and our kids are being impacted by it.
Yeah, and again, even for people like, like I consider myself an ally, of the minority communities that are suffering at the hands of any type of racism. But I know that I need to do more too. And there's never going to be a point where I've done enough. Until this is settled, which unfortunately it'll probably never be completely settled, and life will never be fair for minorities in America, probably in our lifetimes, just because there's so much more that we need to do to accomplish this, and it's such a slow moving process. But as long as that battle is to be had, we all need to do more. Like it's not just good enough to say I hate racism or to call out racism. There's always a next step that you can do, and that goes for me too. I take ownership of that as well.
Yeah.
So we also had other individuals put their foot in their mouths this time, by lying instead of being stupidly authentic. Uh, what's this clown's name?
Mike Norvell.
Mike Norvell, yeah. The recently hired head coach of Florida State, Mike Norvell, decided that he was going to wax poetic how great of a uniter he was, I guess, in his locker room. He claimed that he reached out to each of his players for one-on-one conversations to discuss, the trauma, the reality of the situation that's gone on with the murder of George Floyd and with the protests that have followed. And well, he got called out by his own player because that was a lie. Mike Norvell sent out a canned text to all of his players, probably individual text messages, but it was the same rehearsed thing. And there was no demand for a response from the players. So you can't have a one-on-one conversation just by sending a text. There has to be a dialogue. And if you don't ensure that there's some type of dialogue or make an effort to give that player an opportunity to have a dialogue, you haven't really had a one-on-one conversation. So you can try to spin this as, as he was trying to be, he's trying to maybe exaggerate, but he knew what he did. He was propping himself up as this beacon of unification, which is nonsense. And he got called out for it, and he's going to have to live that down. And I don't know if he can. And I must point out, I can't help but notice that he's the guy that replaced Willie Taggart, a black coach who got fired after just 2 years.
Not even 2 years. He made it like halfway through his second season, and he's gone.
Yeah, so he didn't even make it through his second season. And this is another issue that we have with African American coaches being, even at the college level, being treated like they can be thrown aside and given zero amounts of patience compared to their white cohorts. But that's a topic that we'll discuss later in the NFL level with the Rooney Rule. But the disingenuousness of this is so frustrating that it's pure clout chasing. It's like you're trying to appeal to people for selfish ends by making up a story. And to me, that's just, it doesn't get a whole lot more sleazy than that. Like, how do you live that down?
But I mean, obviously, what it should have done, like you're the head coach, you're the leader. You're gonna have to talk about uncomfortable stuff at some point, whether it's racism or something else. Like you're the guy in charge when stuff's going good, and you're the guy in charge when stuff's not going good. So, it seems like it's his responsibility to do what he said he did, but then also it's not really public business, right? Like you don't have to go claim a victory how you talk to all your players. Like, yeah, you should have done that. But, you don't have to go blab about it to make it seem like you earned some sort of credit for this.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same thing as posting a black box on Blackout Tuesday. I made my profile picture a black square for the day. I posted the black box on Instagram on Tuesday. But that by itself is just an empty gesture if you're not doing anything else to actually try and make a difference. If you're just like, oh, see, look, I put the black box. I'm not racist. I did my good deed for this protest. I'll do something similar when we have the next George Floyd, which inevitably will happen until we actually make a change. Like that's all that is if you're not doing anything else. And this just kind of came across as that, right? I'm not racist. I called a meeting for all my players to have a chance to discuss how they were feeling. No, you didn't. And that by itself doesn't really do that much anyway. Like, what are you even doing?
Yeah, it's definitely a clown show material there. Speaking of disingenuous, the Washington Redskins, and decided that they were going to participate in Blackout Tuesday, and then, as was appropriately pointed out, the Washington Redskins have a slur for a mascot. And maybe I shouldn't say that word at this point. I really, a lot of people don't. At this point, it's so ingrained in, who I am because of growing up here that it's going to be a tough habit to break. But
That's what the team is called.
Yeah, I mean,
yes,
it's what the team's called. But like, Eric, you and I have been talking, about this really since it became an issue again when Bob Costas brought it up at halftime of Sunday Night Football several years ago. Ever since then, this has been a topic of discussion that comes up intermittently with us, and both of us, I think, at this point have gotten to a point where, we're for the name being changed.
Yeah, and I wasn't like that.
I wasn't either.
Like that's because I bought into the the talking points of well, they polled Native American populations and 90% of them said they're not offended by the nickname Redskins, and certain high schools that are on Indian reservations have mascots that have similar names,
I wrote a piece about that for college that I also posted on my blog several years ago that referenced exactly that. If they're naming their high school teams after this, then you wouldn't see a majority black high school use the M words as their mascot, because then people like Eric and I could potentially say that in reference to their team. Continue. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's all right. What was I saying? Yeah, about here's the thing, though. You can cite every poll. You can talk to people. You can, if you're the Redskins organization, you can donate money to however many Native American tribes and charities or whatever Dan Snyder does to try to maintain goodwill with the Native American population. Here's the problem, though. You haven't really gotten around the fact that your team mascot is a racial slur. And that is the reality of it. There's no sugarcoating it. The word Redskin is a racial slur. If your name is a racial slur, I don't care how many people are offended or not, you should change it, because the attitude of having, let's do this, let's be as racist as possible as long as we can get away with it, is exactly why we're in this situation today. That's why we can't have broad, reform, because there's always people that are trying to push that envelope to say, hey, we can't enslave African Americans anymore, but we can make it harder for them to vote, make it harder for them to get education, take away resources, make them sit in the back of the bus or the back of the church, et cetera, et cetera. And then when you take that away, you say, okay, we can't, make it illegal not to discriminate, because that's literally what it was. Like, the end of segregation wasn't the end of legal discrimination. It was the end of illegal integration. Like, you weren't allowed as a black person to sit in the front of the bus. It wasn't just like an option that you could have to have your business do this. It was against the law not to. But anyway, so when we move on from that, we move on to mass incarceration and, the war on drugs, which is targeted at minority communities, and, redlining, which targets African American neighborhoods, not allowing them to get loans, to start businesses, to buy houses. On and on and on, the list goes on. There's always an attempt to try to work around the confines of the law in order to get away with some type of level of discrimination. And allowing this name to continue to exist it's a very minor issue compared to what I just named, but it's a part of the culture of, who cares? Nobody really cares, right? So it's all good, right? Well, eventually some people are going to care. And even if they don't start caring at some point, just do it because it's the right thing to do. I mean, I understand that that's not what businesses do. Businesses look after their bottom line, but that doesn't mean that me, as an outsider, can't say, you guys are a bunch of idiots for not changing the name. I mean, you sound like school children at this point. Trying to say, I'm not going to do that. You can't tell me what to do. That's what it comes down to. Like Dan Snyder's letter, his infamous letter that he wrote, was basically a glorified temper tantrum. All caps. We're not changing the name ever. That's like a 5-year-old crying in the store because he wants a candy bar.
Okay. Well, I mean, what is the reason for not changing it? Like, you can't possibly have a good reason for not changing it. Like, why? Why is this still a thing? It's been, 80 years since they changed it from the Braves? Like, what are you waiting for? What is the problem? What is the reason? Are you citing, I know people cited tradition and stuff, and all these polls and everything, but, like, the reason we're even discussing it and taking a poll is that it's a problem. So you can change it to literally anything else. Just why does it have to be that? You can pick anything. Just look around. Pick something else. It's not hard. How much more stuff you would buy? If you're a fan of this team and the name changes, you throw out all your old stuff. And guess who's going shopping for some new merch because my team's name changed? Yeah, you're buying all of it.
Yeah, and the thing is, again, it's hard to get around the history of this franchise. George Preston Marshall was one of the most racist individuals in NFL history. He is the guy that insisted on pushing the league from being welcoming to black people to becoming an all-white league, which is insane. Like, how is it possible for a league to allow black players and then change their mind? Like, that is so ridiculously racist because you're going against the grain of progress at that point. Like, you're not just sticking with the norms. You're going with, we want these people out, which is nuts. That's absolutely.
And then we ended up being
Major League Baseball in the 1880s, and then they sort of disappeared for one reason or another.
And then
there weren't any until Jackie Robinson.
And then the Redskins ended up being, I believe, the last team to integrate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard that.
It's also a big part of the reason why we have a large contingent of Dallas Cowboys fans in the D.C. area, because D.C. is a very black city, and the local team refused to welcome them on their team, so they said, hey, we're going to go root for your biggest rival. And that's become a part of a tradition for a lot of families in the D.C. metropolitan area. Is you see a lot of anti-Redskins fans, a lot of Cowboys fans, because of that. And you always see people say, oh, how many of you Cowboy fans have ever been to Dallas? I'm like, well, if your team wasn't so damn racist, I might have rooted for the Redskins. But, you've got to live with your own sins.
One thing I think is interesting thinking about that is before the Redskins played at RFK Stadium, they played at Griffith Stadium where the first Washington Senators played. And that is the stadium was torn down a long time ago, but that is now the site of Howard University Hospital. Like, right there, of all places. And, what? That seems ridiculous of itself, but it's been 60 years since that.
It's a slow grind to getting where we need to get, as we've discussed in detail so far. But in addition, another step towards potential progress, at least within the NFL, is that the Rooney Rule has been expanded. Thankfully, they have revised the ridiculous idea that they had a few weeks ago, where they're going to incentivize hiring black coaches with draft picks, because
that's comically stupid.
That's just insulting.
It made it seem like it was a game show, or like you're playing miniature golf, right? Like, oh, hire a black guy and you get this
Yeah, I think it was
reward.
like if you hire a
And
black
then
coach, then your third round pick goes up by 6 picks. If you hire a black GM, it goes up by 10 picks. And if you hire a black position coach, then you get a supplemental pick.
right, it's like, oh, and then if you hit the ball through the windmill and it goes in the hole, like what? This is ridiculous.
So anyway, the actual Rooney Rule expansion, teams are now required to interview 2 minority candidates for head coaching positions. Teams are also required to interview at least 1 minority candidate for coordinator vacancies.
Which previously they didn't have to interview any for coordinator spots.
And we have one where it says and 1 external candidate for front office positions. So you can't necessarily just look within.
Yep.
You have to look outside your organization to fill scouting positions and potential GM vacancies. And we got starting on March 1st of next year, teams will no longer restrict staff from interviewing with other clubs for quote unquote bona fide coaching or front office positions. So basically, you can't hold your guy back from pursuing other opportunities.
Yep. And that's for both people trying to interview for head coach or coordinator positions or even high-level executive positions.
The question I have, I like this, right? I think this is a positive step and this is good. But the question I have is what are they doing to sort of make it so there's more opportunities for minorities at the entrance
So that's
level?
the other thing that the Rooney Rule expansion actually does is that each of the 32 teams will have to establish a minority coaching fellowship program. These coaching fellowships are to be full-time positions, 1 or 2 years in length, to provide NFL legends, minority, and female participants with hands-on training in NFL coaching. And the idea behind that is to try and establish a bigger, more qualified, and more diverse pipeline from which coaching candidates can be drawn.
Yeah, because I was wondering, you can interview as many minority candidates and stuff, but if they're not qualified, if they don't have experience, they could interview me, and that would satisfy the Rooney Rule, but I wouldn't get the job. So I don't know what I'm doing. So what was being done to get people in the door at the bottom to work their way up to be qualified to get a head coaching job?
Yeah, it always starts at the ground level. So it's a good thing that those opportunities are being opened up. It still obviously isn't perfect. There's no way you're going to be able to.
The only way to make it perfect is for people's inherent biases to just be eliminated, and for nobody to hire ever based on race or show favoritism towards somebody based on race, whether it's conscious or subconscious. That's the only way it ever becomes perfect, but we can at least take measures to try and make it closer to that.
I also really like how they extended it to front office positions, because those are people hiring coaches.
Right. And again, when it starts at the top with ownership, when you've got a bunch of, let's call it what it is. The ownership group is in the NFL is mostly a bunch of old white men. And, not every old white guy is racist, but there is a subconscious bias at play with everybody. It's not just older people, it's not just white people, but these are the people in power, and these are the ones that make the decisions. And so you're not going to be able to just wave a magic wand and enlighten these individuals that have been stuck in their ways for their entire lives, but you can at least make sure that qualified black candidate coaches are in the room, are in their face, so they can't hide from it. They have to confront their bias, which is oftentimes a lot of ways to be constructive, because a lot of times people don't even know that they have it until it's hit them in the face, and they either wake up or they shut down. But either way, it's a positive step because it gives you more information about what you're dealing with. So I like this. I think it's good, but I'm not going to stop ragging on the NFL whenever there's an incident of clear this wouldn't have happened to this guy if he was white, which happens all the time in the NFL with coaches and front office positions. I mean, you don't see hardly any African American general managers. I mean,
I think the Dolphins have the only one.
Yeah, I mean that's
and they hired a black coach.
Yeah, they did, and he had a really nice first year. He went 5-11 with a team that should have lost all their games. Tried to lose all their games even. He was just that good of a coach. So
Well, the Eagles tried really hard to lose to the Dolphins.
That's true.
I don't know what they were doing.
That was bad. That was real bad. So that covers it for the Rooney Rule. We'll keep any updates to that all the time. Every year we have coaching hires and firees and all that good stuff. So we'll see if there's any type of change in the long run or short run or whatever with how coaching is being handled at the NFL level.
There were some coaches who come to mind who got fired, and we never stop making fun of Hugh Jackson on this show.
Yeah.
He was so
He deserved to be fired.
you had to go. You mean to tell me
he held on longer than he should have to be
1-15, and then 0-16, and then I think they were like 1-5 or something.
Yeah, 2-5.
Like, are you kidding me? You gotta go. Like, it doesn't matter what you look like. You keep losing and losing and losing, and it's a results-oriented business. So you gotta win or you gotta hit the road.
Yeah, he was definitely the exception that proves the rule there. I mean, he was one of the guys that held on a lot longer than he should have, but that's definitely not the norm for African American coaches. So
Steve Wilkes of the Cardinals, but that was,
Raheem Morris as well.
That was a mess.
Yep. So obviously we all know that the most important thing this week and last week was what happened in Minneapolis, but we do have some just straight sports news, I guess. Both the NHL and the NBA have reached some type of resolution to how they're going to return. We discussed the NHL
last week
return plan last week. So the NBA, I think by a 29-1 vote, passed the resolution to continue the season. 22 teams will be invited to participate in the continuance of the 2020 NBA season.
Only 9 of them Eastern Conference, I think.
Only 9 Eastern Conference teams, 13 Western Conference teams. I haven't actually really read the nitty-gritty on this. I imagine they're going to play some type of, close out to their regular season and then proceed with the postseason as normal.
Yeah,
maybe.
I believe they were saying, something about round robin, like maybe they just all play each other or something. I don't remember exactly, but in order to determine the field of 8.
Right. But the NBA season, the Game 7 of the NBA Finals is projected to be scheduled for October 12th.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's when the season. That's the week that the season usually starts. So that's
honestly
so
at this point, I would shorten the postseason series to 5 games for everything. Maybe keep the NBA Finals 7, but I would almost suggest switching everything else to 5-game series.
I don't think.
I don't think they're going to either. But that would be my suggestion.
To try to tighten it up a little bit. That makes sense. But they've obviously already settled on what they're going to do. And they've already lost.
Elimination.
That would be mayhem. See, but the problem with the single elimination tournament is that it would delegitimize your champion, which is people are already going to talk about how this season has an asterisk next to it because of the goofy way that we have to finish it. But a single elimination is just so anti-professional basketball.
It is, but it will be fun.
It will be glorious, especially we missed out on March Madness, so we'll get a little bit of that action at the professional level. But my understanding is that the draft lottery I think was scheduled for sometime in September now, and the NBA draft will take place I think October 15th or something like that. So pretty shortly after the NBA Finals, which is kind of normal. It's generally a pretty quick turnaround, not necessarily 3 days.
Have they made a determination on when the 2020 2021 season would begin?
I know that they really were circling Christmas as the day to start the season, which has always kind of been their. Anytime the NBA season gets thrown off the rails, whether it's from, you know, CBA lockouts or whatever, Christmas is, the day that a lot of NBA people have actually circled as a way to move the season back because, you know, nobody's really ready for basketball in October. People are still in baseball and football mode, whereas, NBA Christmas Day is, you know, if you're not an NBA fan, you don't care. If you're an NBA fan, it's a delight, because I'll watch basketball all day, even though I'm supposed to be, talking to my family and stuff like that, not
So
doing
if they
that,
were to start
but
around Christmas, would they get a full 82 game season, the full playoffs, and be able to start on time in 2021?
that remains to be seen. I don't know if they would tighten up the season or if they would just extend it to potentially into July or something like that. I know that the players are certainly not going to go for compressing the schedule
Right.
drastically and cutting down on days and things like that. So they might shorten up the season, but the NBA honestly is they're obviously every league benefits from TV revenue, but the NBA makes their money in the postseason. Like that's when their games are on national television, network TV, ABC. Um, they don't need as many regular season games. They had a 66 game season in 2012 that started on Christmas Day due to the labor strike that they had, and I don't think anybody really had a big problem with it. I mean, it went off mostly without a hitch, and I don't think anybody would have any hurt feelings if they said we'll cut out 15 games this year just so that we can get back on a normal schedule. But I don't know what the answer is to that question.
Yeah, that lockout shortened season you just mentioned. I mean, I feel like basketball season should start on Christmas Day. Like that's, like you said, that's when people are sort of switching, changing sports modes, so to speak. And that year, since the season was shortened, they did compress it a little bit. It felt like a track meet to the playoffs. Like there was fewer games, and every game was that much more important, and the games were closer together. So that they could explore something like that, but I'm sure the players will complain.
Yep. So that's the plan for the NBA season to finish out this year. It'll be interesting to see how this massive break that the players have had, not to their choosing, obviously, will affect, how teams' flows are changed and things like that. Obviously the Milwaukee Bucks and the LA Lakers were looking like the teams to beat in the Eastern and Western conferences, respectively. But, it wasn't exactly a runaway, and the dynamic of having no real home court advantage because of a general neutral site could totally alter the way a playoff series would have gone otherwise. So it'll certainly be different, which will make it a little bit fun. It's not going to be the same, which could make it a little worse. But hey, it's sports. We haven't had it in a while. I'm glad it's coming back. Especially
I've been watching golf and NASCAR.
Yeah, Evan was watching a fake golf match between Tiger Woods and Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and Phil.
And it was entertaining. It was good.
Yeah, it's going to be entertaining. I love watching amateurs compete against pros and just see how in over their head they are. It's wonderful.
Tom Brady went full Shagapotamus on like three. I only watched 3 holes, and Brady never hit it in the grass. He hit it in the woods one time. He hit it in some bushes another time, and then he hit another shot so bad it was out of view of the camera, and Tiger was like, well, at least it's on the fairway on hole 7, and they were on hole 3. So, he's just, he split his pants open. That happened. Like, what in the world? It's just a rough day at somebody else's office for Tom Brady.
But he did hole out on that one awesome chip from like 130 yards out. He buried it, so that was pretty awesome.
I wasn't watching that. I was playing Call of Duty.
That was like the highlight of the whole thing was Tom Brady hit this ridiculous shot from 130 yards out right into the cup. But anyway, moving on to other sports that don't quite have their act together. We lamented this with Major League Baseball. I think was that last week.
Yeah.
It's putting together at this point. Baseball still doesn't have any real resolution to how the hell they're going to play the 2020 season, which, doesn't come as a big surprise because they were, busy, playing grab ass last week with their ridiculous ideas in the first place. So, yeah, I heard some different proposals being floated. Somebody said that they're going to have like a 50-game season, which I'm sorry. Just don't even have it. Like, you can't legitimize a baseball season in 50 games. That's outrageous.
Sounds ridiculous.
It
gives the Orioles a chance to make the playoffs.
Does it though?
Yes. Well, I mean, a better chance. There's no flukes over 162 games, right? Like, if you're not a good team, it's going to be revealed that you're not a good team over that long of a stretch. But when you have a short season like this, you can get hot, right? You can go 30-20 and be terrible.
Yeah. Well, especially in baseball, when the disparity in win percentage is so small compared to basketball and football that, when you compress the schedule by 70%, which is what we'd be talking about with 50 games, you're really opening the door to some serious standard error issues and some variances where the divisions could be settled by 1 or 2 games, and some crappy team that really has the makeup of a team that would go 20-30 could randomly just end up going like 26-24, and they could get a wild card. It's insane. Like, the entire concept is just, it's malarkey.
It is, but at the same time, like, every team has to deal with the same set of circumstances if we go that route. The question, though, that I really have more than anything is, let's say they end up not having a season. They end up not being able to decide what they want to do. We scrap the 2020 season. Do players who would have been on the Major League roster, do they get a service year? Like, does that allow a young player to still get a year closer to free agent eligibility?
Well, I know in the situation of Mookie Betts, because the Dodgers traded a whole bunch of prospects to the Red Sox to get him for this season. Whether they play or not, he's going to be a free agent this coming offseason.
Yeah, but it does get a little more complicated with players that may or may not have made the Major League roster, because that was a decision that had yet to been made.
Right.
So, for somebody like Mookie Betts, who is obviously going to be on the team, I'm sure he's no longer allowed to be sent to the minors at this point. He's been in the show for too long, except for like rehab assignments. There's no way they're going to be able to take a service year away from somebody like him. But, for somebody like Adley Rutschman, who wasn't going to make the team, but, a prospect like that, or maybe they were considering putting him on the roster, they could easily just say, well, he wasn't going to make the team, and, biff bam, he still has all of his eligibility. I don't know how that's going to work for those prospects. I think that they have legitimate questions to ask for that. But this is also part of the problem when you screw up so badly that you lose an entire season. Like, this is not a situation where the externality screwed it up, because everybody else is getting back to work. It's only you guys, Major League Baseball, that is still doping around here and not being able to get it together. And every day I see Jeff Passan or somebody come on TV and say something like, I really think that today, before I doubted it, but today I really start to wonder if we're going to have a baseball season. Like, every time it's like somebody new comes up and says, I thought for sure they'd work it out. No, I'm not so sure. No, I'm leaning the other way. I'm like, well, eventually all y'all are going to lean the other way, and we're just not going to have a season. So, what are you talking about?
I just wonder whether I complain about the baseball players a lot because they whine all the time and stuff. But this is the owner's fault, if you ask me. Because, when you're the owner, you set the tone for, not only how your team is run, but the entire league is run. You sign the checks. The commissioner reports to the 30 owners. So if the owners decided, hey, we've got this pandemic situation and the economy and now social justice protesting, we should treat the players as partners in this. And, we're all sharing in this baseball experience together. But they're treating the players like they're the enemy. Like y'all aren't adversaries here. You're both trying to, have Major League Baseball be a success. And, neither side is winning when you're fighting like this. Like this doesn't help anybody. Like say you get a concession from one side or the other, but we're missing games and you're losing relevance. Like, do you want it? I mean, if you're one of the owners, do you want Major League Baseball to be around in 30 years or do you not? Would you rather just have a couple $1 million up front right now and then, the hell with the rest of it?
Yeah, the frustration continues to press on with baseball. Speaking of frustration, the Major League Baseball draft is next week. Typically takes place in early June. I guess it seems like they pushed it back a week maybe. It's only going to be 5 rounds, which if anybody knows anything about the Major League Baseball draft, it is absurdly long in most situations.
There's 1,400 picks.
Yeah, something outrageous like that. Like almost 50 rounds worth of picks. They're cutting it down to 5. So the talent pool that will be entering Major League Baseball this late spring is going to be drastically lower than previous years. Evan has noted on here that the Orioles have picks 2, 30, 39, 74, 103, and 133. So hopefully our very bad Orioles will be able to improve their stock a little bit.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how I know how, but it's amazing that the Orioles didn't have the first pick. You have to be trying really hard to be worse than the Orioles.
It's pretty bad.
The Tigers, my goodness gracious, they were really bad. If you're worse than the Orioles, that's crazy. I've been thinking about the only 5 rounds. If you're a baseball player, or if you're a baseball team, who do you have to pick from? Who is in the pool of players to pick? Because if you're a college player, you got basically your whole season wiped out. You got granted an extra year of eligibility. You can just go back to college. If you want, obviously, if you want to, but you can just go back to college. You don't have to go to the Major League Baseball now. Usually if you're a college junior and you get drafted, you go pro. If you're a college senior, you get completely screwed over because you don't have any leverage. So they don't give you a good signing bonus. And of course, minor league baseball players get paid less than minimum wage anyway. But that option's on the table for everybody. Everybody can go back to college if they want. So who do you even have to pick from? I feel like you might want to pick a high school player if all other things being equal, because he doesn't have to go to college if he doesn't want to, but he also can start his pro career early. But then there's no games for him to play yet because the minor league season is gone, basically.
Yeah, and the problem with drafting in a high school is those players are, as unproven as they get.
They didn't have a season either.
That's true. They don't even have a senior season to hang their hat on.
Math has got a player, Jack Bulger. He's available. He's good.
Sure he is, but generally speaking, GMs like Billy Beane, who try to be smarter about things, tend to prefer to draft college players rather than fresh out of high school due to certain limitations of being able to scout a high school player. But
the top guys are college players this year anyway.
Yeah.
People who I'd only heard of this afternoon.
So I think that does it for our list of topics today. Do you guys have anything else that you want to add or shout outs or anything like that, or any other platitudes?
I just want to say, to you guys, thank you for being open-minded and, talking about uncomfortable stuff publicly, how publicly as it is that we have this show. I'm still not convinced anybody's listening to this. That blows my mind. But yeah, thank you guys for sharing. And, I just want to make it clear that, you guys are my brothers, forever, basically, not only in this podcast realm, this endeavor that we're doing, but in life in general. So I want you to know that, and I guess everybody who is listening and made it this far to know that as well. So appreciate you guys' friendship and support through tough times and stuff. So that means a lot to me.
Yeah, it's right back at you, Evan. We obviously know that each of us have different experiences, and it's important to be able to understand and to, like we've talked about kind of ad nauseum at this point, to listen and to be willing to hear something that might make you think you're not that special or that you don't necessarily know everything. But that's important because that's how you grow. Corey, got anything?
No, just same right back at you, Evan. We're brothers on the podcast. We're the Matha brothers, and we're just brothers in life at this point. We've been friends for so long. I don't see that changing. I want to do everything I can to help you get closer to being able to have the same experiences and advantages in life that I have. And not just you, but everybody in this country who looks like you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I personally haven't experienced too many issues, but, the fact that somebody is experiencing discrimination based on the color of your skin is heartbreaking, frankly. Like, what? Yeah. Why do we have this? This is so stupid.
All right, so for all you guys out there that are listening, all quarter dozen of you maybe, the message goes to you guys too. Keep standing up for what's right. Your voice is valuable, it's valued, and you deserve to be heard. You don't deserve to let anybody tell you that your experiences aren't real or they don't count or they don't matter, because they all do. And keep fighting the good fight. We're going to try to do the same here. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can do so. I'm at Quagmire6791. Evan is at Evan_Ash13, and Corey is at Corey Puffett. I'm sure you'll be seeing some tweets from each of us that fall well outside the realm of sports at this point, because we all have certain feelings that we've expressed here today that we will continue to express through other media. You can follow our Twitter handle for the sports page for the Sportsballers as well. It's at Sportsballers18. We've been a little more active on that.
Evan's done a good job with that.
Yeah, Evan's been the man when it comes to handling that, because sometimes I slack off a little bit.
Adding Wendy's.
And
yes,
I knew immediately that was Evan. It's like, I didn't tweet that.
Hey man, we found out something about Wendy's, so maybe you shouldn't take it so personally. Maybe it's a Wendy's problem more than a Sportsballers problem.
Well, I only did that because it was sort of trending how if you added Wendy's and said if you like this tweet, we're gonna do such and such a thing, and so I'm like, well, I'm in the Wendy's drive-through right now, and if you like this tweet, I'll come back tomorrow, and then nothing from Wendy's.
Shame.
Come on.
That's just shameful Twitter game by Wendy's. Can't cut the mustard there.
I was hoping it would show up in people's feed like Wendy's liked at Sportsballers18's tweets.
They could have been a sponsor, man. They could have been
Oh my God! If Wendy's was a sponsor, I'd be 400 pounds.
It'd be a contradiction from their political views, because obviously we're not huge fans of the people they like, but
I would like a classic double with cheese. Thanks.
Evan's not too worried about that. So,
I guess it should be.
So this is a bit of a longer show. Obviously, we had a lot to say. So thank you for sticking with it. For those listening on the podcast, thank you for tuning in. For Corey and for Evan, I'm Eric. We will see you next week, hopefully with some more positive news, but if not, we'll talk about what we need to talk about. We'll keep fighting the good fight. You guys do the same out there. Stay safe, stay healthy, and Black Lives Matter.
Amen.